Today, we're diving deep into the architecture of a very specific worldview. It's one that methodically fuses a political framework with a theological doctrine to create, really, a comprehensive plan for action. Okay, let's get into it.
Right from the get-go, the source material we're looking at frames this whole thing not as some passive philosophy, but as a deliberate, actionable blueprint. The language is so precise, right? This is an architectural plan, and the goal is crystal clear: victory, both in the here and now and in the hereafter.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. We'll start with the core idea, the engine of the plan. Then we'll deconstruct its three big pillars, starting with you, the individual, then zooming out to the nation, and finally to the world stage. And to wrap it up, we'll look at the one single principle that ties this entire structure together.
So how does this plan for victory actually work? Well, it's all built on a very specific blend of two different worldviews, which the source argues aren't in conflict at all. In fact, they're meant to be mutually reinforcing.
Now this is where it gets really interesting, how these two pieces fit together. On one side, you've got the America First worldview. That provides the tangible, real-world mission for the nation. And on the other side, you have the theological worldview of once saved, always saved, or OAS. That provides the spiritual, the psychological security for the individual who's actually carrying out that mission.
And this is the crucial link that powers the entire system. According to the source, that belief in eternal security, the idea that your salvation can't be lost, it's not just a personal comfort. No, it's framed as a strategic asset. It's the fuel that provides the boldness to act, freeing a person up to take what are described as massive risks required for victory in business and politics, all without the fear of spiritual failure.
Okay, so let's move to the very foundation of this entire architecture. It all has to start with Pillar 1, the sovereign self.
A really central concept here is something called divine stewardship. What this does is it completely reframes your career. It's not just a job anymore. It's a holy calling, a divine trust. In this view, being good at your job, your professional competence, that becomes a form of a sermon. And a business's profit and loss statement, that's treated like a stewardship report, a direct measure of how well you're managing the resources and opportunities you've been given.
And this is where the rubber really meets the road, showing how that philosophy gets translated into concrete action. To achieve this personal sovereignty, the plan calls for specific boots-on-the-ground actions. Financial sovereignty isn't just a nice idea, it means you have to create a literal cash war chest. Intellectual sovereignty, that requires you to do a deliberate information diet audit to cut out what it calls junk food media. And physical sovereignty means you treat your body like a kingdom asset and your training gets scheduled like a non-negotiable meeting.
This quote just nails the psychological engine behind this entire pillar. That deep conviction of eternal security creates a mindset of playing with house money. The source presents this as a massive competitive advantage, right? It allows a person to act with a level of boldness that others, who might be afraid of personal or professional failure, simply can't match.
Okay, so with the individual established as this sovereign actor, the plan zooms out. Let's move to Pillar 2, which applies that exact same mandate, but this time to the national level, the fortress nation.
So the plan lays out 5 very clear strategic goals to build this fortress nation. It calls for onshoring critical assets, so you're not dependent on rivals, unleashing American energy to achieve dominance, purging what it calls the woke virus from institutions, securing the border both physically and culturally, and finally, actively restoring a very specific narrative of American identity.
Now, this really speaks to the level of commitment. This quote is presented as the only acceptable response to people who worry that bringing manufacturing back home would raise costs. That higher price tag? It gets completely reframed. It's now the cost of sovereignty, a necessary, non-negotiable expense to make sure the nation is never held hostage by foreign supply chains.
And this slide shows you just how practical and absolute these mandates are meant to be. When it comes to border security, the plan doesn't just suggest a policy, it dictates a specific action for businesses. It calls for a mandatory 100% e-verify requirement for every single new hire, framing it as the business community's duty to step up and enforce the border when it perceives the government is failing to do so.
Okay, so the individual is secure, the nation is secure. Now the architecture expands to the global stage. Pillar 3, Principled Projection, lays out a very specific approach to foreign policy and how America should interact with the rest of the world.
So this approach is really built on a stark contrast. The plan calls for completely abandoning things like globalism, multilateral agreements, and nation building. It sees them as traps that weaken American sovereignty. What does it embrace instead? Bilateralism. Direct one-on-one deals with other nations, where every single agreement is judged by one single question: is this good for the American people?
And according to this worldview, America's #1 export shouldn't be democracy itself, but a specific set of what it calls truths. First, the truth of capitalism, but specifically within a Judeo-Christian moral framework. Second, the truth of national sovereignty. And third, ultimately, the truth of the gospel, a spiritual mission that, in this view, is best enabled by a strong and secure America.
So, we've seen the individual, the nation, and the global approach. But now, let's look at the unifying principle, the glue that holds all three pillars together, the stewardship of victory.
This slide really shows how that one concept, stewardship, acts as the unifying thread through everything. At the individual level, a person is a steward of the boldness they get from their theological security. As a citizen, they're a steward of the nation's economy and its culture. And as a global leader, America itself is a steward of its power. You see how this reframes the pursuit of power at every single level? It's not about ambition, it's presented as a moral duty.
So, if there's one crucial thing to take away from all this, it's that this worldview, as it's laid out in the source material, presents itself as a complete system. This is not just a collection of opinions to be debated. It's a fully integrated, step-by-step architectural plan, and it's designed to build a very specific future.
And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. Regardless of what's in any belief system, it's worth thinking about how the very structure of a worldview, the way it connects personal belief to national identity and then to global action, can serve as a powerful blueprint for shaping the world.